The day was unusually cold for early October, even by Maplewood standards. The sky hung low and heavy, painted in shades of gray that seemed to press down on the small town like an invisible weight. At the edge of the local cemetery, a crowd had gathered, their faces pale and drawn against the dull backdrop of autumn leaves scattered across the ground. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Not for Daniel Carter. He was only 24, full of life and dreams that stretched far beyond the limits of this sleepy little town. But now here they were, standing beside his coffin, saying goodbye too soon. Laura Carter stood closest to the casket, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled tissue. Her eyes were red and swollen from days of crying, but no amount of tears could wash away the emptiness gnawing at her chest. She felt hollow, as if part of her soul had been ripped out when Daniel died. Even now, she struggled to process it all. Just 2 weeks ago, he'd called her from somewhere deep in the woods outside town, sounding nervous and distracted. "Mom, I think I found something big," he'd said before the line went dead. That was the last time she heard his voice. No one knew exactly what happened after that call. Search parties combed through the forest for days before, finding Daniel's backpack near a rocky cliffside. There were no signs of struggle, no clues pointing to foul play or accident. Just an empty pack and a trail that ended abruptly. Days later, authorities discovered his body, or what they claimed was his body, lying peacefully in a clearing miles away. They said it looked like natural causes, though no official cause of death was ever determined. Laura didn't believe them. None of it made sense. Not the mysterious phone call, not the sudden disappearance, and certainly not the vague explanations offered by the police. As the priest spoke softly into the chilly air, reading passages from the Bible, Laura barely heard him. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel, the boy who used to chase fireflies in their backyard, the teenager who spent hours tinkering with old radios in the garage, the young man who dreamed of exploring places most people only saw in movies. How could someone so alive just vanish without a trace? And why did everything surrounding his death feel so wrong? The murmurs of the mourners faded into the background as Laura focused on the coffin resting atop its metal stand. It was simple, yet elegant polished wood gleaming faintly despite the gloom. Flowers surrounded it, white lilies, red roses, and sprigs of baby's breath arranged neatly by friends and family. Someone had placed a photograph of Daniel on top of the flowers, capturing him mid-laugh during a summer barbecue last year. His bright smile seemed almost mocking now, taunting her with memories she couldn't hold on to anymore. When the priest finished speaking, the pallbearers stepped forward to lower the coffin into the ground. As they began moving it toward the open grave, Laura felt a strange pull in her gut, an inexplicable urge to stop them. She couldn't explain why. It was irrational, illogical, but she needed to see him one more time. Maybe then, she thought, things would start making sense. "Wait," she said suddenly, her voice cracking. Heads turned in her direction, eyebrows raised in surprise. She ignored the questioning looks and stepped closer to the coffin. "I need to see him again," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The undertaker hesitated, glancing nervously at the gathered crowd. Funerals weren't usually interrupted like this, but there was something about Laura's tone, a mix of desperation and resolve, that convinced him to comply. Slowly, he unlatched the lid of the coffin and lifted it open. For a moment, silence enveloped the cemetery. Then came gasps, screams, and frantic whispers as everyone took in what lay inside. Laura froze, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. What she saw defied every law of nature, every shred of logic she'd ever known. Inside the coffin wasn't Daniel, or at least not the Daniel she remembered. The body, if it could even be called that, was humanoid, but undeniably alien. Its skin shimmered faintly, catching the dim light like liquid mercury. Long, delicate fingers rested gently over its chest, each digit tipped with faintly glowing ridges. Where Daniel's face should have been, there was instead a smooth expanse of featureless flesh, broken only by 2 luminous orbs where eyes would normally be. Laura staggered backward, nearly losing her balance. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with the son she loved. Was this some kind of sick joke? A mistake? Or worse, had Daniel somehow become this? Before she could fully process the sight, her gaze fell upon a folded piece of paper clasped loosely in the creature's hand. Trembling, she reached out and unfolded it. The note was written in Daniel's familiar handwriting, though the words sent chills down her spine. If you're reading this, Mom, it means I didn't make it back. Please don't cry. I chose this path because I wanted to protect you. They promised me answers, but now I'm part of something bigger than myself. Beneath the message were strange symbols etched carefully onto the page, unlike anything Laura had ever seen. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the damp grass, clutching the note tightly. Around her, chaos erupted as people scrambled to distance themselves from the coffin. Some cried, others prayed, and a few simply stared in stunned disbelief. But Laura barely noticed. All she could think about was Daniel, and the impossible journey he must have embarked upon. Whatever he'd gotten himself involved in, whatever choices he'd made, it was clear now that his death was anything but ordinary, and somehow, Laura knew her search for answers was only beginning. Laura didn't know how long she sat there on the cold ground, staring blankly at the note in her trembling hands. The world around her felt distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. People had stopped screaming by now, though whispers still floated through the air like ghostly echoes. Some mourners lingered nearby, unsure what to do or say, while others had already begun to leave, too shaken to stay any longer. But Laura couldn't move. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she'd just seen and read. The words Daniel had written burned into her thoughts. They promised me answers. Who were they? What kind of answers could possibly justify what had happened to him? And those symbols? They looked foreign, otherworldly, like something out of a science fiction movie. Laura didn't recognize them, but someone might. Someone who knew about things beyond ordinary understanding. That's when she remembered Dr. Alan Peterson. Dr. Peterson was a retired astrophysicist who lived on the outskirts of Maplewood. Most people in town thought he was a little odd, always talking about aliens and UFO sightings, but Laura had always found his passion intriguing. She'd met him once at a community event years ago, where he'd enthusiastically explained his theories about extraterrestrial life. At the time, she hadn't paid much attention, dismissing it as harmless eccentricity. Now, though, she wondered if he might actually have some insight into what Daniel had gotten himself into. By the time Laura arrived at Dr. Peterson's house later that evening, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of deep purple and black. His home was modest but unmistakably unique, a one-story brick building surrounded by overgrown bushes and towering oak trees. A weathered telescope stood on the front porch beside stacks of old astronomy magazines. Laura hesitated for a moment, before knocking on the door, suddenly unsure if this was such a good idea. What if he laughed at her? Or worse, what if he dismissed her story as nonsense? But when Dr. Peterson opened the door, his expression softened immediately upon seeing her tear-streaked face. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, recognizing her from the funeral earlier that day. "Please, come in." Inside, the house was warm and inviting, though cluttered with books, papers, and various pieces of scientific equipment. A large map of the night sky hung on one wall, dotted with pins marking constellations and mysterious locations. Dr. Peterson gestured for Laura to sit at a wooden table near the window, then poured her a cup of tea without asking. He seemed to understand that she needed a moment to collect herself. Finally, Laura spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Peterson, I need your help. Something strange happened today, at my son's funeral." She paused, unsure how to continue. Would he believe her? Or would he think she'd lost her mind? To her relief, Dr. Peterson nodded encouragingly. "Take your time," he said. "Whatever it is, I'm listening." Taking a deep breath, Laura told him everything. The phone call, the mysterious disappearance, the alien-like body in the coffin, and the note with the strange symbols. As she spoke, she watched his expression shift from concern to curiosity, then to something resembling awe. When she finished, he reached out and took the note from her hands, studying it carefully under the soft glow of a nearby lamp. "These symbols," he murmured after a long silence. "They're not random. They're coordinates." Laura blinked, startled. "Coordinates for what?" "For a location," Dr. Peterson replied, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "Somewhere far away, possibly even outside our solar system." She stared at him, struggling to process what he was saying. Outside the solar system? That sounded absurd, impossible. Yet, given everything else that had happened, it wasn't entirely unbelievable either. Still, doubt crept into her mind. "Are you sure?" she asked cautiously. "Could it be, I don't know, some kind of code? Or maybe a hoax?" Dr. Peterson shook his head. "No, these patterns are consistent with ones I've studied before. Similar markings have appeared in crop circles, ancient cave paintings, and even satellite images of certain remote areas. Many people dismiss them as coincidences or hoaxes, but I've always believed they're messages from beings far more advanced than us." He pointed to one of the symbols on the note. "This one here represents a specific star cluster, and this set of lines." He traced them with his finger. "They indicate direction and distance. Whoever wrote this wanted you to find something, or go somewhere." Laura's heart raced. If Dr. Peterson was right, then Daniel hadn't just stumbled upon something extraordinary. He'd been chosen for it. Chosen by who or what? She didn't know. But the note made one thing clear. He wasn't entirely gone. Somewhere out there, beyond the confines of their world, he was waiting. "I want to find him," Laura said firmly, surprising even herself with the conviction in her voice. "If there's even a chance he's still alive or whatever form he's taken, I have to try." Dr. Peterson studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Following these coordinates will require resources we don't have. And if we do manage to track down whatever, or whoever is behind this, we can't predict what we'll find." "I don't care," Laura replied, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "I lost him once. I won't lose him again." Seeing the determination in her eyes, Dr. Peterson nodded slowly. "All right. Let's start by figuring out where these coordinates lead. There's an old observatory on the edge of town. It's abandoned now, but it used to be a hub for amateur astronomers. Maybe there's something there that can help us." The next morning, Laura and Dr. Peterson drove to the observatory, a crumbling structure perched atop a hill overlooking the town. Weeds grew through cracks in the concrete driveway, and the metal dome housing the telescope was rusted and dented. Inside, the air smelled musty, thick with dust and decay. Papers littered the floor, along with broken chairs and empty coffee, cups left behind by its former occupants. As they sifted through the debris, Laura couldn't help but feel a pang of hopelessness. Could anything useful really remain in this forgotten place? But Dr. Peterson seemed undeterred, moving methodically from room to room, examining every scrap of paper and piece of equipment he could find. After nearly an hour of searching, he let out a triumphant shout. "Laura, come here," he called, waving her over to a desk in the corner. On it lay a stack of files yellowed with age but otherwise intact. Opening one of them, Dr. Peterson revealed pages upon pages of notes, diagrams, and photographs detailing strange occurrences in the area, unexplained lights in the sky, unusual radiation readings, and reports of encounters with unidentified flying objects. One document caught Laura's eye, a report dated several decades ago, describing a massive object spotted hovering over the woods where Daniel had disappeared. Witnesses claimed it emitted a low hum before vanishing without a trace. Attached to the report was a grainy photograph showing a blurry, disc-shaped craft suspended in midair. "This has to be connected," Laura whispered, her pulse quickening. "Daniel must have found something related to this." Dr. Peterson agreed. "It's possible. These files suggest that the government conducted secret experiments in this region, studying phenomena they couldn't explain. If Daniel stumbled onto one of those sites, or worse, if he encountered whatever caused them, he may have been taken aboard one of those crafts. The realization hit Laura like a punch to the gut. Taken aboard? By who? Aliens? The word sounded ridiculous, yet it fit perfectly with everything she'd seen and learned so far. Whatever the truth was, it was bigger than she'd imagined, and far more dangerous. "We need to follow the coordinates," she said finally, her voice resolute. "We need to see where they lead." Dr. Peterson nodded, though his expression was grim. "Then we'd better get to work. This isn't going to be easy, but if anyone deserves answers, it's you and Daniel." Together, they gathered what they could from the observatory and headed back to Dr. Peterson's house, their minds buzzing with possibilities. For the first time since Daniel's death, Laura felt a flicker of hope. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. Whatever awaited them at the end of this journey, she was determined to face it, for Daniel's sake and for her own. The days that followed were a blur of activity for Laura and Dr. Peterson. They spent every waking moment in his basement workshop, surrounded by piles of equipment scavenged from flea markets, junkyards, and dusty corners of his attic. The goal was clear: build a device capable of interpreting the coordinates on Daniel's note and sending a signal to wherever, or whoever, it led. It sounded impossible, like something out of a science fiction novel, but neither of them had time to dwell on doubt. Every second counted if they wanted to find answers, and possibly Daniel himself. Dr. Peterson took charge of the technical side, explaining what he needed while Laura handled the grunt work. She learned quickly how to strip wires, solder connections, and assemble components under his guidance. At first, she felt clumsy and out of place, her hands fumbling with tools she'd never used before. But as the hours turned into days, she grew more confident, finding comfort in the rhythm of creating something tangible. Each piece they added brought them one step closer to uncovering the truth. "This isn't just about following coordinates," Dr. Peterson said one evening as they worked late into the night. "It's about making contact. If we send a signal strong enough, maybe someone or something will respond." Laura nodded, though her stomach churned at the thought. What if someone wasn't friendly? What if their message attracted danger instead of help? She pushed those fears aside, focusing instead on the hope that Daniel might still be out there, waiting for her to bring him home. As they pieced together the device, a jumble of antennas, circuits, and blinking lights, it became clear that this project was as much about faith as it was about science. Faith in the unknown, faith in each other, and faith that Daniel's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of nonstop effort, the device was ready. It looked crude compared to the sleek machines seen in movies, but it hummed with energy when powered on, its various parts glowing faintly in the dim light of the workshop. Dr. Peterson double-checked the connections while Laura held her breath, praying silently that it would work. "We need to test it, Doctor," Peterson said, adjusting a dial on the control panel. "But we can't do that here. We'll need somewhere remote, away from interference." He suggested an abandoned desert area several miles outside town, a place locals avoided because of its eerie silence and strange rock formations. According to rumors, people claimed to see strange lights hovering above the dunes at night, though no one could explain them. To Laura, it seemed like the perfect spot to try their experiment. Early the next morning, they loaded the device into the back of Dr. Peterson's old pickup truck and set off toward the desert. The drive was long and quiet, the only sounds coming from the engine and the occasional rustle of wind against the windows. Laura stared out at the barren landscape, her mind racing with questions. Would the device work? Would anyone, or anything, answer their call? And most importantly, would they find Daniel? When they arrived, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, vast and empty, except for jagged rocks and patches of scrubby bushes. It felt like another world, an alien planet far removed from the comforts of home. They chose a flat stretch of ground near a cluster of boulders and began setting up the device. Dr. Peterson connected the power source, adjusted the frequency settings, and entered the coordinates from Daniel's note. Laura stood nearby, clutching the crumpled paper tightly in her hand as if afraid it might disappear. "Ready?" Dr. Peterson asked, glancing at her. Laura hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Ready?" With a flick of a switch, the device roared to life. Antennas whirred, lights blinked faster, and a low hum filled the air. For several minutes, nothing happened. Just the steady hum of the machine and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Laura's heart sank. Maybe it hadn't worked. Maybe they'd come all this way for nothing. Then, suddenly, the hum grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. A beam of light shot upward from the device, piercing the darkening sky like a beacon. Laura shielded her eyes, squinting against the brightness as the light expanded, forming a shimmering column that seemed to stretch infinitely into space. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Dr. Peterson admitted, equally awestruck. "But whatever it is, it's responding." The air around them crackled with energy, and the temperature dropped sharply. Laura wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the thick jacket she wore. Then, without warning, the light dimmed, slightly, revealing a figure descending slowly from above. It was humanoid, but unmistakably not human, its form glowing softly as it approached. Its features were indistinct, shifting and changing like ripples on water, but there was no mistaking the intelligence behind its gaze. Laura froze, unable to move or speak. Was this Daniel, or was it something else entirely? The figure stopped. A few feet away, its presence both calming and overwhelming. Though it made no sound, Laura felt words forming in her mind, clear and distinct. "You called and we have come." She gasped, clutching her chest as the voice resonated within her. It wasn't spoken aloud, yet she understood it perfectly. Beside her, Dr. Peterson stared wide-eyed, clearly experiencing the same phenomenon. "Who are you?" Laura managed to ask, her voice barely audible. The figure tilted its head, as if considering the question. "We are explorers, seekers of knowledge. Your son joined us willingly, choosing to transcend his limitations in exchange for understanding." Tears streamed down Laura's face as she realized what the figure meant. Daniel had become part of them, not lost, but transformed. He was still out there, alive in a way she couldn't fully comprehend. "Can I see him?" she asked desperately. "Please let me see my son." The figure extended a glowing hand, and images began to flood Laura's mind. Vast galaxies, shimmering, nebulae, planets teeming with life. Among these visions, she saw glimpses of Daniel, smiling and radiant, standing beside beings unlike anything she'd ever imagined. He looked happy, peaceful, free from the constraints of mortality. "He's safe," she murmured, collapsing to her knees as the weight of everything hit her at once. Safe, but forever changed. Dr. Peterson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his own expression filled with wonder. "This is bigger than us," he said softly. "Bigger than humanity itself." As the figure stepped back, the light began to fade, retreating into the sky until only darkness remained. The desert returned to its usual stillness, broken only by the soft rustle of wind through the rocks. Laura sat there for a long time, staring at the stars above, feeling both grief and gratitude wash over her. Daniel was gone, but not truly lost. Somewhere beyond the reach of Earth, he was exploring worlds she could only dream of. And though she missed him deeply, she knew now that his journey had given him exactly what he'd always wanted, a chance to discover the infinite possibilities waiting among the stars. The desert was quiet again after the light faded, leaving Laura and Dr. Peterson alone beneath the vast expanse of stars. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The enormity of what they had just witnessed and experienced was too overwhelming to put into words. Laura sat on the cool sand, her legs trembling beneath her. unable to tear her eyes away from the spot where the glowing figure had stood moments before. Her mind replayed the images it had shown her. Galaxies swirling like cosmic oceans, planets with landscapes more beautiful than anything she could imagine, and Daniel, her Daniel, smiling brightly among beings who seemed both strange and familiar. Dr. Peterson broke the silence first, his voice low but steady. "That was incredible," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've spent my entire life studying the possibility of extraterrestrial life, but I never thought I'd actually see proof." Laura didn't respond right away. She couldn't. Her thoughts were a tangled mess of emotions, grief, relief, confusion, and even a flicker of joy. Yes, Daniel was gone, transformed into something beyond human comprehension. But he wasn't lost. He hadn't vanished into nothingness. Instead, he was out there somewhere, exploring worlds she could only dream of. Somehow knowing that made the ache in her heart a little easier to bear. "Do you think he's happy?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Peterson knelt beside her, his expression thoughtful. "From everything we saw and felt, I'd say yes. He chose this path because he wanted answers, because he believed there was something greater waiting for him. And now he's part of something extraordinary." Laura nodded slowly, wiping the tears from her cheeks. As painful as it was to accept, she knew deep down that Daniel had always been different. Even as a child, he'd been curious about the unknown, fascinated by stories of space exploration and alien encounters. While most kids dreamed of becoming firefighters or doctors, Daniel had talked endlessly about traveling to distant planets and discovering new forms of life. At the time, Laura had smiled at his enthusiasm, dismissing it as youthful imagination. Now she realized how much those dreams had shaped him, and ultimately led him here. "He always wanted to see the stars up close," she said softly, gazing upward at the endless sea of twinkling lights above them. "I guess he got his wish." "Doctor," Peterson placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "In a way, we all share that wish, to understand our place in the universe. Your son took a step none of us could have imagined, but his journey reminds us that there's so much more out there than we can comprehend." They stayed like that for a while, sitting side by side in the quiet desert, letting the enormity of the moment sink in. Eventually, Laura turned to Dr. Peterson with a determined look in her eyes. "We need to tell people about this, about Daniel, about what we saw." He frowned slightly, clearly hesitant. "Are you sure? Think about how they'll react. Most people won't believe us. They'll call us crazy or worse." "I don't care," Laura replied firmly. "Daniel gave me a gift, a glimpse of something amazing, and I owe it to him to share it with others. Maybe not everyone will understand, but some will. And maybe, just maybe, they'll start asking questions about the world beyond our own." Dr. Peterson considered her words for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. This isn't just about Daniel anymore. It's about opening people's minds to the possibilities out there. If we can inspire even a few to look up at the stars, with curiosity instead of fear, then it'll be worth it." With renewed purpose, they packed up the device and headed back to town. The drive home was quieter this time, each of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at Dr. Peterson's house, they immediately began working on a plan to share their story. Using his old laptop, they compiled photos of the device, sketches of the glowing figure, and detailed notes about their experience. They also included copies of the documents they'd found at the observatory, along with explanations of the symbols and coordinates from Daniel's note. Over the next few days, Laura reached out to local newspapers, radio stations, and community groups, sharing her story wherever she could. At first, the response was mixed. Some people dismissed her claims as wild conspiracy theories, while others accused her of fabricating the whole thing for attention. But there were also those who listened, really listened, and saw the sincerity in her eyes. These individuals began spreading the word, sharing Laura's story with friends and family until it gained momentum. One evening, as Laura scrolled through social media, she came across a post that made her heart skip a beat. Someone had uploaded a video of the mysterious light seen over the desert, the same lights she and Dr. Peterson had witnessed during their experiment. Beneath the video, hundreds of comments poured in, with people speculating about UFOs, government, cover-ups, and encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Many mentioned her name, linking her story to the footage. Encouraged by the growing interest, Laura decided to hold a public meeting at the local library. She invited anyone curious about her experience, hoping to answer their questions and provide evidence of what she and Dr. Peterson had discovered. To her surprise, the turnout was larger than expected. Dozens of people filled the room, ranging from skeptical skeptics to wide-eyed believers eager to learn more. Standing at the front of the room, Laura took a deep breath and began speaking. "My name is Laura Carter, and 2 weeks ago I buried my son Daniel. Or at least I thought I did." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "What I found inside his coffin changed my life forever. It showed me that there are things in this universe we can't explain, and that sometimes the people we love find ways to transcend the limits of our understanding." As she recounted her story, she watched the faces of her audience shift from skepticism to fascination. By the end of her talk, several people approached her, thanking her for sharing her experience and expressing their own hopes of one day making contact with intelligent life beyond Earth. Among them was a young journalist named Emily Dawson, who introduced herself with a warm smile. "Ms. Carter, your story is incredible," she said. "I'd like to write an article about it, not just for our local paper, but for a national magazine. Would you be willing to let me interview you?" Laura hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, but only if you promise to tell the truth. No exaggerations, no sensationalism, just the facts." Emily agreed, and over the following weeks, her article gained widespread attention. It sparked debates, inspired discussions, and even caught the interest of researchers and scientists specializing in astrobiology and extraterrestrial communication. Slowly but surely, Laura's story began to reach audiences far beyond Maplewood, planting seeds of curiosity and wonder in the hearts of countless readers. Through it all, Laura kept Daniel's memory alive, sharing his passion for exploration and discovery with anyone who would listen. Though she missed him every day, she found solace in knowing that his journey had opened doors for others, doors leading to the stars and beyond. And late at night, when the world grew still and the sky stretched endlessly above her, Laura would step outside and gaze upward, imagining Daniel somewhere out there, smiling down at her from the infinite expanse of the cosmos. Months had passed since Laura and Dr. Peterson's encounter in the desert, but the memory of that night remained vivid in her mind. It was as if every detail, the shimmering figure, the hum of energy, the images of distant galaxies, had been etched into her soul. Life in Maplewood slowly returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could be after such an extraordinary event. People went back to their routines, but whispers of what Laura had shared lingered in conversations at coffee shops, schools, and community gatherings. Some dismissed her story as fiction, while others embraced it as proof of humanity's place in a vast, mysterious universe. For Laura, life took on a new rhythm. She no longer spent her days consumed by grief over Daniel's loss. Instead, she found purpose in sharing his journey with others. Her talks at libraries and community centers evolved into larger speaking engagements, drawing audiences eager to hear about the possibility of life beyond Earth. She became a voice for curiosity, encouraging people to look up at the stars not with fear, but with wonder. Dr. Peterson continued to support her efforts, often joining her at events to explain the science behind their experiment. Together, they inspired countless individuals to think differently about the cosmos. Children wrote letters asking questions about aliens and spaceships. Teachers incorporated Laura's story into lessons about astronomy and exploration. Even skeptics began to soften their stance, admitting that her sincerity made them question their own assumptions. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Laura sat alone in her backyard beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak tree. The air was crisp with the scent of autumn, and fallen leaves crunched softly underfoot whenever she shifted on the wooden bench. Beside her stood the telescope, Dr. Peterson had given her, a gift meant to keep her connected to the stars. She often used it to scan the night sky, searching for constellations Daniel loved or simply marveling at the infinite expanse above. Tonight, however, she wasn't looking through the lens. Instead, she let her eyes wander freely, taking in the beauty of twilight giving way to darkness. A single star appeared, then another, until dozens dotted the heavens like tiny lanterns. Each one seemed to carry a piece of Daniel with it, reminding her that though he was far away, he was still part of her world, in spirit, if not in form. As she sat there, lost in thought, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. For a brief moment, she felt something, a warmth, a presence that reminded her of Daniel. It wasn't frightening, just comforting, like a silent reassurance that he was okay. She smiled faintly, closing her eyes and letting the sensation wash over her. "You always did love the stars," she murmured aloud, her voice barely audible. "I hope you're finding everything you ever dreamed of." Opening her eyes, she glanced down at the photograph clutched loosely in her hand. It was the same picture from Daniel's funeral, the one showing him mid-laugh during last summer's barbecue. His smile seemed brighter now, less haunting and more hopeful. She traced the edges of the frame with her thumb, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. Sadness because she missed him deeply, and gratitude because she knew he hadn't truly left her. He was out there exploring worlds beyond imagination, living a life unimaginable to most. Over time, Laura came to accept that her role wasn't to bring Daniel back. It was to honor his choice. By sharing his story, she kept his spirit alive, inspiring others to dream bigger and reach further than ever before. She realized that losing someone didn't mean forgetting them. It meant finding ways to carry their legacy forward. Her thoughts drifted to the people whose lives had been touched by Daniel's journey. There was Emily Dawson, the journalist whose article had sparked global interest in extraterrestrial communication. She'd gone on to write a book about humanity's fascination with the unknown, dedicating an entire chapter to Daniel's story. Then there were the scientists who reached out to Laura, thanking her for reigniting public interest in space exploration. Their emails and letters reminded her that even small actions could ripple outward, creating waves of change. Laura also thought about the children who sent drawings of spaceships and aliens, imagining themselves as future astronauts or researchers. Their enthusiasm filled her with hope, knowing that the next generation might unlock secrets of the universe Daniel could only glimpse. Perhaps someday they would make contact with beings like those who had taken her son, not as strangers but as fellow explorers seeking understanding. The months ahead brought unexpected opportunities for Laura. She was invited to speak at conferences, alongside astronomers, physicists, and philosophers. Though she lacked formal education in these fields, her perspective resonated deeply with audiences. She spoke not just about Daniel's transformation, but about the importance of embracing mystery and pursuing knowledge, even when answers seemed elusive. At one conference, a young girl approached her afterward, clutching a notebook filled with sketches of planets and alien creatures. "Do you think I'll get to meet someone like your son someday?" the girl asked earnestly. Laura knelt down to meet her eye level, smiling warmly. "If you keep looking up and asking questions, I have no doubt you will. The universe is full of wonders waiting for us to discover them." The girl beamed, clutching her notebook tighter, and ran off to show her parents. Watching her go, Laura felt a surge of pride, not just for the girl, but for all the people daring to imagine a future among the stars. Back home, Laura continued her nightly ritual of stargazing. Each session felt like a conversation with Daniel, a way to stay connected to the part of him that still existed somewhere out there. On clear nights, she imagined him standing beside her, pointing out constellations or describing the colors of distant nebulae. Those moments weren't real, of course, but they brought her comfort nonetheless. One particularly cold December evening, as snow began to dust the ground, Laura bundled up in a thick coat and scarf before heading outside. The sky was unusually clear, revealing countless stars twinkling against the black canvas above. She adjusted the telescope, focusing on a cluster of stars near Orion's belt, one of Daniel's favorites. As she peered through the lens, a shooting star streaked across the sky, leaving a trail of light in its wake. She closed her eyes, making a silent wish. Wherever you are, Daniel, know that I'm proud of you. Keep exploring, keep dreaming, and don't forget to look back at me once in a while. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed something unusual, a faint glow hovering near the horizon. At first, she thought it might be a trick of the light or her imagination playing tricks on her tired mind. But as she watched, the glow grew brighter, forming a familiar shape, a column of shimmering energy stretching upward. Her breath caught in her throat. Was this? Before she could finish the thought, the glow dimmed slightly, revealing a figure descending slowly toward her. It was humanoid, radiant, and unmistakably Daniel. His features were different now, glowing softly with an inner light, but his essence, the kindness, the curiosity, the love, was unmistakable. Tears streamed down Laura's face as she stepped forward, unsure whether to run to him or stay rooted in place. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, his expression serene. Though he didn't speak aloud, his voice echoed clearly in her mind. "Mom, I'm here just for a moment." "I miss you so much," she said, choking back sobs. "But I understand now. I understand why you chose this path." "And I'm grateful for you," he replied. "You've shown others what's possible. You've helped them see the beauty of the unknown." They stood there together for what felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat, the bond between them stronger than words. Finally, Daniel stepped back, his form beginning to fade into the night. "Take care of yourself, Mom. And keep looking. Our journeys aren't so different. We're both searching for meaning." With that, he vanished, leaving Laura alone beneath the stars. But this time she didn't feel empty. She felt whole, grounded in the knowledge that Daniel's spirit lived on. Not just in the memories of those who loved him, but in the infinite possibilities waiting among the stars. As she walked back inside, brushing snowflakes from her coat, Laura smiled softly. Life would never be the same without Daniel, but she knew now that he hadn't truly left. He was out there exploring, discovering, and inspiring others, even from afar, and as long as she kept looking up, she would always find him.